Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to mark the Day of the Imprisoned Writer. It is an honor to have you all with us to commemorate this day. My name is Nadine Farid Johnson. I am the Washington Director of PEN America. The Day of the Imprisoned Writer began as an effort by PEN International's Writers in Prison Committee, of which our esteemed panelist, Dr. Ma Thida, was recently elected chair. Since 1981, PEN centers around the world have gathered on November 15th in support of writers jailed for exercising their fundamental right to free expression. By detaining writers, governments worldwide deprive them of this fundamental right, while also robbing the broader public of access to their innovative and influential voices of dissent, criticism, creativity, and conscience. You may see in our presentation today the image of an empty chair. That is to symbolize and honor those who cannot be with us today, joining us in action. The writers who cannot be present because they have been imprisoned, detained, disappeared, threatened, or killed. We are thrilled to have author, journalist, and PEN America trustee Marie Arana and author Azar Nafisi join us for special remarks today, using their prominent voices to rally for the urgent release of imprisoned writers around the world. I am also honored to share this virtual stage with three remarkable free expression advocates: Burmese writer Ma Thida, and Egyptian writer Ahmed Naji, two former prisoners of conscience, and activist Jewher Ilham, who is the eldest daughter of imprisoned Uyghur writer and economist Ilham Tohti. Their stories and experiences speak directly to the lives of the many jailed writers worldwide, whose freedom we call for today, and the devastating impact on their families and friends. We'll also be joined by longtime writers advocate and free expression expert, PEN America's own Karin Deutsch Karlekar. It's a privilege to gather with all of our participants and attendees on this important day. Now I will turn it over to PEN America trustee and acclaimed writer Marie Arana to share a bit about the writers we are highlighting this year, and then lead us in a reading of a joint statement by the 2021 PEN Barbie Freedom to Write honorees. Marie?
Thank you, Nadine. It's a privilege to be here to honor a writer's right to free expression, which is the mission at the heart of PEN America. Thank you to our wonderful speakers and to all of you out there who join us in solidarity as we mark the Day of the Imprisoned Writer. Today, we come together strengthened by our shared commitment to defend free expression wherever it is under threat. As writers, readers, and members of a global literary community, it is important. No, let me rephrase that. It is imperative that we stand with imprisoned writers wherever they may be and show them our support. We need to remind them that they are not alone, that the injustices against them are not ignored, that any oppression of their right to write or speak their minds will not be tolerated. As a Latina born in South America who has witnessed the fear and injustices brought to pass by tyrannical authoritarian regimes, I personally feel this charge very strongly. When governments incarcerate writers for their words, we pledge to recite, publicize, and disseminate those words even more widely. We take action, and we thank you if you do too. This year, PEN America is highlighting 7 cases of writers currently detained or imprisoned. Yuri Dmitriev is a historian and author serving a 13-year prison sentence on retaliatory charges for his writings on and work uncovering mass graves of thousands of victims of Stalin-era mass executions. Dmitriev's work to uncover the truth behind these horrific atrocities have made him a target of the Putin regime, which has worked to rehabilitate Soviet-era methods and whitewash atrocities. Mehmet Osman Kavala is a Turkish publisher, cultural rights activist, and philanthropist known for his support for numerous rights-oriented civil society organizations. Detained since October 2017, Kavala has faced a relentless series of national security-related charges levied against him in retaliation for his promotion of free expression and championship of cross-cultural dialogue in Turkey. Pham Don Trang is an author, blogger, and journalist whose books and online writings in support of human rights and democratic principles have long made her a direct target of the Vietnamese state. In October 2020, Trang was arrested and charged with Article 117, a law that criminalizes the making of materials that, quote, aim to oppose the state, unquote. Dawit Isaak is an Eritrean Swedish playwright, writer, and co-owner of Setit, an independent newspaper published from 1997 until its closure in 2001. Arrested on September 23, 2001, he has been held in prison for over 2 decades without being charged or brought to trial by the Eritrean government. Recognized as one of the long-detained journalists, Dawit Isaak has been held incommunicado since 2001. Xu Jiyong is a Chinese writer, civil rights advocate, and scholar well known for his series of online essays concerning contemporary social issues in China. On February 15, 2020, Xu was detained after writing multiple open letters and online commentaries criticizing the Chinese government, including its response to the COVID-19 outbreak in the country. Vladislav Yesipienko is a Ukrainian freelance journalist who contributed to the Krim Reali project, an affiliate of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, for 4 years. He was detained on March 10 in the Russian-occupied Crimea by the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation after he laid flowers at a monument as tribute to the Ukrainian poet Taras Shevchenko. Bakhtash Abtin, Kevan Bajan, and Reza Khandan Mahabadi are celebrated writers, free expression advocates, and board members of the Iranian Writers Association. Abtin is a poet and filmmaker, Bajan is a novelist and journalist, and Khandan Mahabadi is a writer, literary critic, and popular culture researcher. The three are serving a collective 15 years and 6 months in prison on spurious national security and propaganda charges due to their public profiles as writers and their work against state censorship. All three have suffered cruel medical neglect since their sentences began in September 2020, with devastating consequences for their health. As the 2021 PEN Barbie Freedom to Write honorees, Abtin, Bajan, and Khandan Mahabadi are emblematic examples of individuals who have dedicated themselves to the fundamental right to expression and are paying for it with their own freedom. As we pull up a virtual empty chair signifying their absence, a chair, by the way, that also represents the absence of every writer currently imprisoned for his or her work, I will read a joint statement written by the Iranian honorees and sent to us to acknowledge their acceptance of the award. And I quote, "Dear colleagues and writers who seek freedom, we greet you from Evin Prison's Ward 8 in Tehran and express our gratitude for your attention to us. More than anything, we're delighted that the importance of freedom of expression is being recognized. Despite the modern world's astonishing technological and industrial advances, humanity is facing a crisis. This includes the freedom of expression without exception that is needed more than ever. In many parts of the world, authoritarianism that is best manifested in censorship and oppression, publicly or hidden, is ruling and spreading fast. This doubles the responsibility of writers because human beings and creativity flourish in absolute freedom. Isn't that the writer's dream? We have been imprisoned for fulfilling this responsibility, and we have no regrets. We're also well aware that there are many famous, unknown, free, or jailed individuals who are fighting to put an end to censorship in Iran and around the world. Your award, in fact, belongs to all of them. It also belongs to the members of the Iranian Writers Association who have been standing up against censorship and for more than half a century have been advocating for freedom of expression without exception under unimaginable circumstances. Once again, we salute you and express gratitude. Signed, Reza Khandan Mahabadi, Kaivan Bajan, Bakhta Shabtin, unquote. It's been my distinct honor to read those words to you. And now, back to Nadine and to our distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie. And now it is time to hear from our esteemed panelists, and we are so grateful for each of you participating in this talk today. Firstly, Karin, can you lead us off with a bird's eye view of the big picture globally? Just how many writers are jailed around the world? And what are some of the trends that you are seeing in terms of why they are targeted?
Thank you so much, Nadine, and to all the other panelists as well. Well, first, in terms of just, the very big picture, in the most recent of PEN America's Freedom to Write indexes, which was released in the spring of this year, we counted 273 writers, academics, and public intellectuals who were in prison or unjustly held in detention in connection to either their writing, their work, or related activism. And this was in 35 countries and all geographic regions of the world. So it's a global problem. And the number of writers that we counted last year represented a 9% increase over the prior year. So this is signaling it's a problem, and it's a deterioration in climate for free expression globally. In terms of the trends that we're seeing and the reasons why writers are particularly targeted, definitely over the past year, we've seen on a global level that the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened existing situations for free expression in many countries. We've seen governments using the pandemic as an opportunity to further restrict speech, and a number of individuals who have raised their voices to critique the government's handling of the pandemic have been targeted or imprisoned via existing laws or in the name of public health. In cases that would fall into this category, I'd mentioned Xu Ziyang in China, Kekwenza Rushirapachaija in Uganda, and Mushtaq Ahmed in Bangladesh. What we've also seen over the last year or two is the increasing role that writers and public intellectuals have been playing in protest movements and civic action around the world in places like Cuba, Thailand, and Belarus. And in 2021, we've seen, Ma Thida will talk about this in more depth, but particularly in Myanmar, the key role that poets, writers, and creative artists are playing in fighting back against government oppression. Continuing trends that we've also seen in the index have been the attempts to silence those who are writing in ethno-linguistic minority languages or advocating for linguistic rights. This has particularly been an issue in Turkey, Iran, and parts of China, notably Tibet and the Xinjiang Autonomous Region. And then we've also seen writers and academics in certain countries punished for daring to research or uncover history and difficult periods in the past of a country. Yuri Dmitriev in Russia is sort of the prime example of this trend. And then what we've also noticed in the last few years has been crackdowns on, I would say, professional writers organizations or associations. So the Iranian Writers Association, which we're highlighting this year and has a number of members in jail right now, has been targeted, particularly because of their steadfast pushback against state censorship and demanding that writers have rights to free expression in Iran. But we've also seen this trend in Vietnam, for example, in Belarus with our sister PEN Center that has been essentially shut down, and with attacks on PEN centers in other countries such as Nicaragua and Myanmar as well. So I'll stop there for now. I want our other panelists to delve into some of these topics in a bit more depth. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Karin. And as you mentioned Myanmar, Ma Thida, I will start with you. You were first imprisoned in Myanmar in the 1990s during an earlier period of military dictatorship, and have spent many years living and writing under a junta's rule, including since the coup earlier this year. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience behind bars and the risks you faced and how these have shaped your writing and your expression and your activism?
Well, I was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment in 1993. And in these days, we were not allowed to read nor write. So this is, I think, not allowing to read nor write is the hardest punishments than the 20 years imprisonment, because at that time, I was only living by reading. I feel I committing a crime if I cannot read, something like that. So in that state of mind, it was really hard to survive without books, without reading, without writing. But luckily, I practiced Vipassana meditation inside. That saved me because I also critically ill. I contracted pulmonary tuberculosis and endometriosis. I was only 80 pounds and I couldn't even walk to the interview room to meet my parents. And it will be, you couldn't imagine, that was really terrible situation. So mainly I support myself with the reading myself, you know, not the books. So Vipassana meditation, the ground understanding and the concept of Vipassana meditation is reading ourselves, our body and our mind. So that saved me, to be frank. That's why I believe in reading a lot, reading the text or reading ourselves. It works, you know. So after that kind of a little bit extreme situation, you know, at that time I was so much struggling to survive, you know, even though I myself a medical doctor, I was not allowed to have a proper medication. There was a big fight between the J authority and myself to having a proper medication for myself. I know how to treat myself, but I was not allowed, something like that, you know. So it was pretty hard, these 5 years and 6 months. But after that, you know, I also facing, because we still do have censorship. The press scrutiny board is there, you know. So it's really hard to get my pieces, my work got published, even for some editors. After I was released and some editors started asking me, oh, do you remember how to write? Something like that. Indeed, they're not willing to publish my pieces in their magazines or the journals. I said, okay, the press scrutiny board might be the one who knows how I can still write these things, something like that, because most of my pieces has been banned by the press scrutiny board. So I need to find so many ways to be still creative. And I really appreciate our readership. They can read between the lines, beyond the words. So we use so many kind of ways to pass not just our theme, our message, but also the information, you know. There was no other private independent media in the country for more than 5 decades, you know. So in these days, the struggle was so much. I think this kind of the too much atrocity I having gone through, making me more open to the creativity. That's why after that, the way of my writing has been changed a little bit, you know. It's in between kind of the experimental writing or the creative nonfiction, so and so. That's why my first book on my this side, the book, the roadmap, this book is named the no creative nonfiction. It is the documentary fiction, you know, because it's based on the reality, but I fictionalize the reality, something like that. So most of my writings is now not following the formal kind of the ism, you know. It's just try to reflect the situation of my own country and my own personal mood, you know, something like that. In a way, you know, this is how we as citizens of Myanmar have been expressing what we have been experiencing or facing through. So it's pretty much, yeah, such a good and bad impact of the imprisonment.
Oh, thank you so much for setting that stage and sharing that experience. And Ahmed, I'd like to turn to you. You were imprisoned in Egypt in 2016 for passages in your novel, The Use of Life. At the time, it was one of the first instances of a creative writer being imprisoned for their free expression since President El-Sisi took office. But we now see writers, columnists, poets, even students detained for their words and expression quite regularly there. Can you tell us a bit about your experience and what you are seeing in Egypt now, 5 years on? You're unmuted, sir.
First of all, thank you for having me. And yeah, so basically, I was in the prison for 1 year because publishing a chapter from my novel at Literature magazine. But this was in 2016. Since then, since 2016 until now, the situation in Egypt is going worse and worse. I was out of the prison before the Trump era, but like since Trump came to the power, he kept calling Sisi like my favorite dictator, giving him a green light. We witnessed a huge, devastating crackdown on freedom of expression in Egypt. Writers, journalists, even TikTok influencers like literally now today as we are talking, there is a trial of two girls who are like just TikTok influencer, and one of them sentenced for 10 years because like for doing a TikTok videos. And this situation, this fear environment, it become like it becomes so normal that no one outside of Egypt is talking about it. And situation in Egypt that we have now writers and poets who are in prison and they're writing and publishing their books while they are in the prison. Just this year, Ahmed Doma, who's in the prison for 15 years sentenced, published his new poem collection called Curly. Ala Fattah, who's in prison now for like 7 years, just published his English translation of his last book, You Have Been Defeated Yet. So this environment is devastating and creating fear. And all of this is happening by direct support by the American government. Basically, all of this is happening by support from you, from American citizen money. Egypt receiving $1.3 billion every year from United States, and they invest this money on building new prison. Just last month, like Sisi, the president was on TV and he announced like building the biggest prison in the Middle East using American technology and with the help of American company. Now, American politicians are saying this to American people that we support stability in the Middle East and this regime keeps stability. Well, American politicians also have a fish memory. Before in 90s and the 80s, America did the same with Mubarak regime and supported regime for more than 30 years with money and political backups and so on. And in the meantime, everything from the surface seems subtle and peace, but inside this prison, we ended up with guys like Muhammad Atta, the mastermind behind 9/11. I was in the prison, and from my experience, I witnessed how the Egyptian prisoners in the end are the biggest recruiting camp for terrorists. I witnessed in the prison how young kids, 18 and 19 years old, will be catch from the street just because like they were singing, they were making like a concert, and sent to the prison where like radical Islamistic will take care of them, will control them. The kids will stay in the prison for 3 or 4 years, being like brainwashed by this radical Islamist, and then sent out of the prison without opportunity to continue his education or to work. So basically, this kind of stability and what we are witnessing is not only a threat for writer and freedom expression, but a threat for us of all. It creates anger and fear, and one day this will bomb in our face.
Thank you. I'd like to come back to some of the points you raised, but first I'd like to actually hear from Jewher. Your father, who is the prominent Uyghur intellectual and writer Ilham Tohti, was sentenced to life in prison in 2014 on the spurious charge of separatism, right, for his online writings. And we know he's been held incommunicado for several years as the crackdown on Uyghur writers and culture has intensified. Can you tell us about your father's current condition and how his imprisonment has affected your life and your family?
Thank you, Nadine, and thank you, Pen, for having me today. I feel a very complicated feeling as the first time when I met with folks from Penn, it was early 2014. Not long after my father was arrested. And it has been since 2014, it has been almost 8 years now. And I still haven't seen my father, and my father is still locked up in prison. And he was sentenced to life. From 2014 to 2017, several of my family members were able to see my father, and the lawyers were able to visit him every 3 months. Even though the meeting time was only 15 minutes, even my entire family had to travel all the way from Beijing to Urumqi to see him, but they're only allowed to see each other for 15 to maximum 30 minutes. And every time when my family members visited my dad, we always notice a change. Either his hair turned grayer, he gets even slimmer, every time he loses more weight. Eventually, he lost more than 40 pounds. He was denied food twice, each time for 10 days. He was shackled, beaten. And sometimes, since 2017, none of my family members were able to visit him or allowed to see him. And lawyers were also banned from seeing my father. And it's all against the Chinese law. But putting a man like my father in prison should be against the law too. The Chinese government accused my father for being a separatist, for someone who advocates for violence, for inciting ethnic hatred. But all he ever have done was to use Uyghur Biz, which is his website, as a platform to create a dialogue, to create understandings between Han Chinese group and Uyghurs. All he ever tried to do was write about his thoughts and share his research, and to help develop the Uyghur region, help the Chinese government to help to develop the Uyghur region. But a man like him, a wise, kind, decent man like him, is now locked up behind the bars and sentenced to life and away from all the family members. I haven't seen my family for close to 9 years. I have been alone here in the US since I was a teenager. I was supposed to be with my father in the US, but now, as you can see, I'm still here alone. And I cannot see most of my family members for the past few years. I can't even communicate with them freely. When Ma Thida mentioned that it's worse to not have a pen and not be able to write than compared to sentenced to 20 years. And I really, when Ma Thida mentioned that, it hurts me, because I know how much writing means to my father. And I just wish he's given a pen or a pencil in the prison, so it can help him go through all these long days, hours and nights. So maybe if he doesn't receive a paper, maybe he can write on his walls just to keep him sane. Anyone who is locked up in a prison in China in solitary confinement, like my father, going through all these, it's under a risk of going insane, I'm sure. But my father predicted his detention. He knew he was going to being locked up in prison. He knew it, and he continued his work, and he wasn't afraid. And I am sure if he had a chance to go back to 10 years ago, he would have done the exact same thing all over again. Now I still have 2 younger brothers. They're teenagers, and they had to grow up without a father figure in their lives. And the older one now had to be sent back to Urumqi to study. He was studying in Beijing, but because of before he was born, the Chinese police already started harassing my family for a very long time. My mother had to go back to our hometown to give birth to my brother, and now they're forced to go back to my go back to my hometown to study because their birth certificate doesn't belong to Beijing. And we all know what is happening in the Uyghur region. Not only my father, hundreds of thousands of scholars, intellectuals, writers, just like my father, are locked up. Hundreds of thousands of children are being separated from their family members.
Thank you. Yeah, hearing from each of you, I am continuously struck by your courage, by your bravery, by your by your presence. You're just so inspiring. We're really grateful to have you here. Karin, all of our panelists are coming from countries where the jailing of writers is a key tactic, and it's used to suppress dissent. It's used to dissent prominent voices of conscience, as we've heard today. Can you tell us about the other worst offenders? Because as we know, this is a trend that is ongoing and growing. And we'd love to know a little bit more about other emblematic cases as well. And what is the reason behind these individuals being put into prison? And what does that say about free expression in the country?
Well, I'll start by noting that what Jewher said is absolutely correct. I mean, her father is one of the sort of more prominent cases in China, but if you look at China, it has last year we counted 81 writers in jail, far more than any other country that we count in the index. And there's definitely, I would say, it's the tip of the iceberg in terms of the numbers. In Xinjiang, for example, it's essentially an information black hole due to the extreme level of Chinese state repression against the Uyghur minority. And so the cases that we count are, I would imagine, just the tip of the iceberg. Elsewhere in China, apart from sort of this very, very severe crackdown on ethnic minority groups, we have sort of just a large scale repression of any type of critical writing, speech, academic inquiry. So that's there's many reasons why China sort of is the top country in the index. I'll highlight a few others right now. I mean, Saudi Arabia ranks number 2 in our yearly count, and we actually saw an improvement in the numbers on the face of it, with many writers and academics and intellectuals being released from prison last year. But what I'd highlight for Saudi is that I don't think the conditions have actually improved for free expression. What we did see is many people being released, but under very strict conditionality that prevented them from actually returning to their writing or professional life. So you have in Saudi, I would say, a facade of some improvement in the numbers, but where legal charges remain, ongoing trials, there are travel bans, there are restrictions on their writing or on their online expression. And so on the face of it, the numbers are very good, but cases of sort of Lujain al-Haslul being released last year, Iman al-Nafjan, a number of other academics and intellectuals, the situation really has not improved in Saudi at all, and we need to continue to put pressure on the government there and on the Crown Prince to really try to make meaningful change rather than cosmetic change. I'll highlight Turkey as well. That's the number 3 country in the index. Again, the environment remains extremely challenging. We highlighted Osman Kavala''s case this year. I mean, I would say that his is another emblematic case where he's been slapped with multiple politically motivated criminal charges. These charges have been recognized as having no basis by the European Court of Human Rights. And it's one of these situations where, he's released on one of the charges on appeal, and then another set of charges is slapped against him as soon as the sentence is overturned. So this case is not, it's not the only one. And in Turkey, we are, keeping an eye on dozens of cases of writers and intellectuals and journalists who are behind bars. Iran, number 4 in the index, we have several dozen writers behind bars, mostly on national security charges, alongside hundreds of other political prisoners. There are a number of human rights advocates and writers jailed, the most prominent among them that we work on being Nasrin Sotoudeh, but also, there's also cases of writers and activists such as Golrokh Ebrahimi Ayreh, who wrote poetry and then also spoke out once she had been jailed and was jailed for even more time. And then the focus on the Iranian Writers Association. I mean, this is a group of writers who is pushing back against state censorship. One of their members just a few weeks ago was finally pulled into jail. He's been sentenced to 11 years for translating a book. Our Freedom to Write honorees this year have been charged with, as part of the IWA's commemoration of past murders, they produced an internal book on the history of the organization and the role in opposing censorship. So these are ridiculous charges and, are not in any way endangering national security, and yet they've been sentenced to 16 years in jail. So that Iran remains of deep concern. And I would say, in Iran, as in other countries, and Ma Thida alluded to this as well, the conditions for prisoners, the grave health concerns, which have only been exacerbated because of COVID, means that really when people are jailed, their lives are literally at risk. I'll note finally just the situation in India. India is the only semi-democratic state that ranks in the top 10 in our index. But what we really have seen over the past few years, and it's getting worse, is that the Modi government is employing what are essentially authoritarian tactics to silence any critics. The prosecution of the Bhima Koregaon case, which has led to the detention of the poet Barbara Rao, columnist Anantal Tunde, and the writers Hani Babu and Gautam Navlaka are the most egregious examples of this trend. But we've seen, dozens of writers in India who are subjected to online harassment, physical threats, lawsuits, bans on travel or visas, and other forms of intimidation at the hands of their government. So these are some of I would say, the countries of grave concern that we see, and where we're really tracking, not just one case, but it could be 5, 10, 20 different cases. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. So each of you mentioned the fact that this has been going on in your respective countries for decades, right? We see trends and they go up and they go down, but the fact is this has been a long-standing practice. You each also talked in different ways about how one survives in such a situation, how one keeps one's sanity in the face of just unrelenting horror. I'd be grateful to each of you, and I'll kind of tailor these questions to each of you individually, but I'd like to hear from you about how those of us on this call and policymakers and others can really, truly offer support, how we can most be helpful. Ma Thida, with you, I would like to know how the current situation in Myanmar differs from when you were imprisoned, and what has been the impact of the February coup on writers, and then how we in the international community can support Burmese writers who are currently detained or even at risk of detention. Dr. Thida, you're muted.
Sorry. This time, after the new coup attempt by the military, everything is getting harder than ever, They arrested without having any kind of principle, So that's why some writers were arrested in the very early morning of the coup attempt. And then they were not being under particular charge. They were not allowed to meet their family members. So their situation is, since the 1st February, since then, we really don't know how we can support them, something like that. And then some writers were detained, some journalists were detained without having enough reasons. For example, recently they arrested a journalist, not because of his work, but because he just posted a small little poem after the military set fire the whole town in Chin State. It's called Tantala. That, making the whole town people just fled to the villages, something like that, and that their properties, more than 160 households, including 2 churches, has been burnt down, something like that. So with that emotion, this journalist expressed in this little poem, and then he was arrested for posting a poem on the Facebook, something like that. And then you might notice about some poets has been shooted, aimed at their heads during the protests. And then another poet, he was arrested after the protest, and the next morning his dead body was sent to his family member. Even some of his organs were missed. So this kind of atrocity is going on. So nearly every single person in Burma can be detained or killed without any reasons. So being a human being, it's more than enough reasons to be arrested, to be killed, and to be put under very inhumane treatment. You know, one of the NRE members, it is thought to be, they poured acids into his mouth and faces. So after we received the dead body, the whole faces of Haynes was melted, you know, something like that. So the atrocities is everywhere. Sometimes, you know, they thought it was something happened nearby. They just arrested the passerby people, something like that. So some writers, in this case, a lot of writers are now under hiding. You know, we never know who can be the target today or next day, something like that. So a lot of writers just fled. So I think the international community, we truly need the support for those who cannot live inside the country, who needs to relocate to the other countries. They truly need the immigration status. They truly need the funding. They truly need kind of the support also for their family members. You know, some of them, they couldn't bring their family members. So on the other hand, some writers, they couldn't leave the country for so many other reasons. You know, right now at the airport, they have so many new rules and regulations, and they even arrest people at the airport. You know, so especially for most writers, they are public influencer and their faces were pretty well known. It's almost impossible to get through the airport. So they were hiding inside the country from place to place. Even every night, they need to move from one home to the other, something like that. So they truly need, to be frank, money to survive. You know, it's really hard to relocate even inside the country. And for those, they couldn't even move out of their home. They also having such a big threat and fear and concern. So they also do need to survive, because all periodicals has stopped already. The distribution system is not working right now. Right now, the print media, all the print media, especially the literature magazine, has been stopped. So for the writers and the poets, it's not just the physical threat, it's also livelihood threat. You know, they have no platform to write, and they really don't know how to make an income or how to survive, or how to, even some writers say they don't know how to write right now because of too much atrocity from all over the country, making them pretty much depressed and having the threat, and they need to be safe. So it's from every single point of view, the writers in Myanmar, they do need help. What I can say is, yeah.
Thank you. Ahmed, you mentioned the poets and writers who remain imprisoned and are still publishing their works, and you have written essays about your experience both in prison for Believer magazine, as well as your more recent, I should say, experiences now living in the US for Popular. Can you share with us the impact that solidarity and advocacy on your behalf had on you while you were in prison, and what it's been for you now since that time, being able to write and express yourself since your release after that experience?
Sorry again, I keep doing this. I believe it's everything. Solidarity and advocacy and showing this literal brotherhood that we are sharing is what helped me to be free and to be here. First, during my time in the prisons, and after I get out of the prison, I was banned from traveling and leaving the country for a year and a half. It was advocacy and help from several people from Ben American institution that get me out of the country and get me the opportunities that I have here as a City of Asylum Fellow at Black Mountain Institute. I want to say also that solidarity is important because those writers are in the prison because of their writing, because of their work. The system, the regimes are sending them to the prison to silence them, to make them forgotten. It's just like when we remembering them, when you do this share or retweet on social media of some cases in Latin America or Myanmar or whatever, you are raising their voice again. So you are continuing their message. The other thing is this regime, this tyrant regime, they are afraid of spoken word and they are afraid of the media. Don't ever imagine or say to yourself, oh, what I will do if I sign this petition, if the Chinese government is going to free him. You really don't know. And even if it doesn't affect the regime, it helps as a writer, the prison writer, to feel that there is people outside of the prison who really care about him, who support him. It helps him to feel that he's not alone. Otherwise, writer will broke from one side. They will lose their mind stability and peace of mind. I want also to insist on the importance of solidarity network. Amazing work like PEN America and PEN International and City of Asylum, because usually in many cases, writer who will be out of the prison, they will not find the space to work right in their country. Like the case where Karin was talking about Saudi's writers. Yes, they are free, they are out of prison, but they are banned from publishing, from writing, even using their social media account. So this kind of work that we are building and I'm trying to build and strengthen this solidarity network is very important to hold this writer voice and to support them in the next step. Because of all of that, I'm here now in Las Vegas as a City Asylum Fellow. I published 2 books since I was in the prison. One is a fiction, a novel called Tiger to My Room, and the other is nonfiction called Rotten Evidence, Reading and Writing in the Prison, which is basically about my case and the whole experience in the prison. English translation may be out next year, and I'm grateful for PEN America and for all my colleague brothers, my colleague writers who helped me while in the prison and out of the prison and in my past, and I wish to be helpful and for other prison writers.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on your publications. I'm really glad to hear that. So I would like to continue this thread on the effects of advocacy. Jewher, since living in forced exile here in the US, you have tirelessly advocated, obviously in support of your father's release, and you've become a human rights activist and an author in your own right. And actually, I'm going to take a moment here to note, this is not in what we've kind of planned here, but I wanted to note that you do have a book coming out this week, and it's called Because I Have to, This Path to Survival and the Uyghur Struggle. So I'd like to ask you a little bit about that and how you've worked to keep your father's story alive, along with continuing to draw attention to the ongoing large-scale repression against the Uyghur community, and whether you feel that attention to and solidarity with writers and other prisoners of conscience has an impact on their potential release.
Thank you, Nadine, for mentioning the book. I can't speak up for all the human rights advocates, but as an Uyghur human rights advocate and as a daughter, one of the biggest fear that we share is that the name of our loved ones, the ones that are being persecuted, are forgotten. And that's why for the past 8 years, I have constantly, as you mentioned, advocating and supporting my father's release. And also, I have come to realize that so before 2018, I have only been advocating for my father's release. But starting from 2018, many of you may have noticed I have been more vocal on the entire Uyghur cause. And because that's when I realized that this is no longer about one person anymore, even though my father was indeed one of the very first Uyghur who were locked up. And he was one of the very few Uyghurs who were living in mainland China who was, even though under constant persecution, he still kept speaking up. But I realized that this is no longer about one person anymore. This is about all the Uyghurs, about millions of families. And there are so many Uyghur daughters, sons, brothers, sisters, just like me. And not only my father is behind the bars, my cousin is also locked up in prison. For what? For having a photo of my father in her cell phone and one of his articles in her cell phone. That's why she was locked up and sentenced to 10 years. She was a nurse. And I know there are so many Uyghur nurses out there, so many teachers out there, so many soccer players out there. They're locked up simply because they were either trying to express their ideas or just simply because of their ethnic identities. So I know what it's so important for me is to constantly remind people of how important those people are. It's not that their social status or that they belong to the certain religious groups. Doesn't matter who we are, what our ethnic backgrounds, what our gender is. Don't we all deserve to live freely? Don't we all deserve to express our thoughts and in different ways, by pen or by words, by speaking? It's just I thought this should be a very simple matter, though people tend to make it very political. And I keep reminding people this is not a political situation. This is a humanitarian crisis, and we need to fix it. So what I've been doing for the past few years to constantly reminding people, this is not only about one person, not only about 10 people. This is about humanity, and we all should care. And doesn't matter what cultural background we're from, what if we're related, if we're Uyghurs or not. And also, lots of people have asked me that, oh, we're not politicians, we're not wealthy, and we're not influential people. Maybe I cannot do anything. I really want to remind people that please do not underestimate your voice. Please do not underestimate your voice. Please do not underestimate your voice. I have to emphasize this so many times. The reason why authoritarian regimes around the world have been trying constantly to shut people up, trying to lock people who have been voicing their, speaking up, to either lock them up or pressure them or kill them. Why? Because the governments know how important and how powerful our voices can be. That is why it doesn't matter who you are. Do not ever, let go. Do not ever give up on your power especially when you're living in a free land like United States, where you have the right to speak up, where you will not be persecuted for speaking up, using your own rights. Please do not waste your ability. Please do not waste your power. And I really do think it will make an effect. There have been over 100 survivors, Uyghur survivors have been released from the camps or prisons for the past few years. And it's directly related to all the campaigns that have been going on. It's directly related to all the voices we have collected for the past few years. And I have personally talked to this Hu Jian. He's a well-known Chinese dissident and Chinese activist as well. He was in prison, and he said that he could clearly notice a change when he received the Sakharov Award. The prison guards were treating him differently and treating him better, because once you are remembered by the world, by the international community, you matter to the Chinese government, and they are afraid of harming you. You might not be released immediately, but your circumstances in prison will change. And so that is why I really want to remind people that your attention, your solidarity really matters for those people who are locked up behind bars.
Thank you so much. So we have a few minutes left, and I really want to ensure that we have time for questions and also to hear from Azar Nafisi. So from Amir Sultani, hello Amir, thank you so much for joining us. He says, thank you, beautiful friends. What about non-writers? How do we build solidarity networks that extend support to everyone, especially illiterate or impoverished people who have even less visibility? How do we use music, film, and other tools to support you? And what about financial needs of families of prisoners?
Sure. I'd like to answer that question. Thank you, Amir, for raising this question. It's extremely important. We have many jobs, different types of jobs in this world. We have dancers, we have writers, we have musicians, we have chefs, and we all can contribute to the cause in a very different ways. And as you mentioned, music, film, and other tools can be supporting. It doesn't matter if it's the Uyghur cause or if it's towards solidarity for the Afghani people, or it doesn't matter which cause. We're all equally very important. For instance, I have been assisting on a documentary film for the past few years. And we have been collecting footages both inside of China and outside of China. And our team have traveled to 33 locations to collect testimonies, footages, and supporters, their campaigns. You know, we're hoping to release this film next year, and your help your support can be tremendous help to our work. And also, I know that there are other documentary films that have on the Uyghur cause, on the Uyghur issue, and I know that I have personally received songwriters that they have written song for my father and for me as well. I think his name is Jewher Ilham, and also I know for a fact that we was really appreciated when there are songs or music that is dedicated to support the Uyghurs. I know that our hearts will be warmed whenever we see those. Just 2 weeks ago, I have received an email from this a songwriter, a musician, and he wrote a song dedicated to support the Uyghurs and all the other persecuted communities in China. So if you're a musician, if you are willing to write music or songs or poet on the Uyghurs, we will deeply appreciate it. It will also help bring attention, awareness to this cause. And if there are more films to be made on this issue, also it's highly appreciated because there's so little out there. And if you check Uyghurs, they're only very short, maybe a few minutes of news documentary pieces out there, but you hardly see any decent, long, full films that are fully on the Uyghurs that is working on to feature Uyghurs. So we really need those. And if you're a writer, if you're a chef, you can, maybe create a piece or make Uyghur food, or go to support the local Uyghur restaurants. And many of those Uyghur restaurants, they are suffering because when they're cooking, they have to remind themselves that their family members, they might be starving in those prisons or in those camps. They might have no food. And then when they are serving, some of them, they have to fight that whether should we even serve Chinese customers or not. Some of them, they have to fight over that internally. And some of them, they can separate the government with the people, but some of them, they feel the guilt. And it's just every Uyghurs in the diaspora, they're suffering, even though if they might not be directly locked up in the camps, but every Uyghur, they have 1 to 10 family members that could be directly affected. So showing solidarity to them in different ways, in any ways, it's highly appreciated by our community.
Thank you. I actually want to follow up on that and ask Ahmed, you mentioned the subversive nature of music in so many instances in Egypt right now. In terms of this question, how do we use music and film and other tools to be of support? What would you say for those persons who are imprisoned in Egypt, how those tools can be of help?
Well, I think it's dangerous to force art into like direct cause. I think it creates bad art and it doesn't help a cause. And I think rather than focusing on creating propaganda art that like talking about like unrepresenting people, it's will be better if we encourage those unrepresented people to produce their art. So if you want to help non-writers, so it's better to invest in culture infrastructure, in building bookstores, library, and theater, and to educate and encourage non-representing people to produce that art. This is, I believe, is better than like producing art talking about these people. And this leads us to the point number 1, which again is freedom of expression. As part of freedom of expression crackdown the Egyptian regime is having, they are closing library and bookstores. Just in the last 5 years, more than 40 bookstores and public library have been closed without any reasons. They are closing theater. They are banning and forcing young kids who are producing and doing music, and they are like 17 and 19 years old, and they are banning them from singing or releasing their song or doing a music concert. How we can help is depending on who we are and where we stand. I believe how we can help if we are talking to American citizens by convincing them not to give their money to the military American government, which would use this money to build the prisons and to use like surveillance technology to control people. That's it.
I also want to add a little some points. It's
Please.
What we are talking about is something like doing a firefighter walk only after a fire, something like that. So we do need to prevent a fire. So I prefer to have the legislative reform and some other serious resolutions, and regarding the preventing not just writers, but also non-writers to get arrested and to get in danger. So that one point we should also focus on, otherwise we just wait someone to get problems or to get at high risk or to get arrested, then our work starts, something like that. So we should do both. At the same time, we should focus on preventing effect, the legislative reform and some other thing, that's all.
Thank you so much. I will turn momentarily to Azar Nafisi. I just wanted to have, there was one question I wanted to make sure we were able to answer, and that is directed to Jewher. Do you have any idea how many Uyghur writers are in prison today?
It is very hard to estimate a number. According to researchers and experts, their investigations, there have been over 1 to 1.8 million Uyghurs are going through vocational trainings, being sent to camps and prisons, but the numbers keep changing. And according to Chinese government's own released white paper, every year there are 1.29 million people are going through those vocational trainings. Those include writers and scholars and professors, but it's extremely difficult to identify a lot of them since it's hard to get information out of China nowadays. Censorship, it's a huge issue in China, as many of you are aware. And a country like China, you cannot even send your friends a text message like Winnie the Pooh, literally Winnie the Pooh, it's banned. And imagine talking about a detention of certain person, having my father's photo and his article in my cousin's phone, even though they're directly related, it could cause someone's detention. Imagine other Uyghurs' circumstances. So it's really difficult to identify and confirm the numbers of people who are locked up. But there's a website called shahidbiz.com, sorry, I have to write it down to spell it. It's shahidbiz.com. You will be able to see where people have reported their family members, their friends, people, their former colleagues, with their photos, their jobs, their even identification numbers of those missing people. Some of them you will be able to see if they're locked up and sentenced, or some of them are simply detained in camps and there's no official trial or charges. So, but you will be able to see names of people who have disappeared, but these are not all. There are only very, very small numbers of the whole big picture, since not everyone who are locked up has someone who made it out of China, who were able to skip China, or who is from someone that is overseas.
Thank you. So now I am honored to turn this over to celebrated author Azar Nafisi, who will be delivering closing remarks. I wish to share that Ms. Nafisi has a forthcoming book of great relevance to today's topic. It is called Read Dangerously, The Subversive Power of Literature During Troubled Times. It will be released in March 2022, so please keep an eye out. Azar, over to you. Azar, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was thinking of the Islamic Republic and I muted myself. I was just saying that it is an absolute pleasure and privilege to be part of this very important and necessary event. You know, I kept vacillating between heartbreak and hope. And of course, hope always wins, especially in this case. Now, all through this meeting, since Maurice started to talk till this great panel, one question kept going through my mind time and time again. It's a question that has been with me for years, for decades. I think I first maybe posed it to myself when the fatwa against Salman Rushdie was issued. I asked myself, and I would like to ask you, what is it about writers, a group of men and women whose only weapons are their voices and their words? What is it about them that frightens and threatens some of the most powerful and brutal regimes and mindsets in the world? They only have the pen, still the pen, you know. And yet it seems as if the totalitarian and authoritarian mindsets cannot survive if the writers are free, if they have their freedom of expression. And I would like to also mention that when I'm talking about writers here, I would like to speak both as a writer and a reader, because the freedom of expression for the writers guarantees freedom for millions of readers around the world. And so writers and readers are sort of joined at the hip, and that's why they need to support one another. Now, the whole point about this, the fact is that the totalitarian regimes have to silence the writers in order for them to survive. What is it that the writers do or say that is so frightening to them? Because their violence, their brutality comes not out of a position of strength, but of weakness and fear. They're afraid of writers. They need to eliminate them. And as I say this, some of the names of the writers murdered by the Islamic regime come to my mind. Ahmad Miralai, Jahangir Tafazzoli, Saeed Sultanpur, Saidi Sirjani. All these people came from such different backgrounds and different beliefs, but one thing they believed in was their passion and love for the truth. And truth is always dangerous, because once you know it, you cannot keep silent. Whether you are a writer or a reader, knowing the truth brings the responsibility of giving voice to it. And that is what the regimes are afraid of. I wanted to read to you something from an feminist novelist, Iranian feminist novelist, Shahnoosh Parsipur. She wrote her prison memoirs, and in those memoirs, she talks about how her passion and love for democracy and writing kept her going while she was in jail and made her resist while she was in jail. And just to show you what kind of a jail she was in, one night she and her cellmates were counting, the regime was executing people in the yard, and the prisoners were counting the number of headshots, the single headshots. And they counted over 250 single headshots that night. That is where Shahnoosh was staying and resisting. And she talks about how when the jailers would demand that she do something, she instinctively disobeyed. And she talks about the reason why she disobeyed them. She says, and I quote, I believe that if I did, if she complied with them, I would lose my creativity to write. I believed, as I still do, that one of the secrets to being a writer is honesty with oneself. A writer might be a coward or an egoist, but if she's mired in dishonesty, the brilliance of her pen and the brightness of her mind will grow dark. And this is what these imprisoned writers are doing today. They are resisting the dark and searching the light of truth. Now, the question comes, how do we support them? How do we actualize support them? First of all, it goes to a mindset. We have to realize that supporting writers in jail and supporting freedom of expression is not a matter of where you live or who you are or what your beliefs are. It is something universal. You might be living in United States of America, but if a writer in Egypt or in China or in Myanmar or anywhere else in the world is jailed, censored, tortured, or killed, you will be also diminished. Your freedom will also be curtailed. The whole idea of writing is based on two human traits. One is curiosity, the desire to know the unknown, the desire to talk and connect to the other in order to reveal something that you don't know. And empathy, which is the ability to put yourself in the shoes of someone else, someone who is not you, and thereby feel with them, have the same, listen to the same beating of the heart with them. That is the important thing about writing, that it connects to strangers who once they write and read, they become intimate strangers. And so writing is a universal act, and writers, wherever they live in the world, we support them. Sometimes there are great repercussions for those who support these writers. Remember when Salman Rushdie, the fatwa was given against him, like the Nobel laureate Wilsonika was threatened with death. The other, the Egyptian Nobel laureate Najib Mahfouz was attacked with a knife. The translator of the Turkish translator and writer Aziz Nasin was the hotel he was staying at there was arson against it, and 38 people died. So this is not just about us. It is about us and becoming one with them. Now, one other thing that I wanted to mention, and this discussion today brought it back to me, that how lonely I felt as a citizen, never mind an imprisoned writer, when I was in the Islamic Republic. They had confiscated our right to connect to the world, and we felt alone, and how important it was for people to give voice to our confiscated voices. I remember, the way this loneliness felt, it was like poison in our bloodstream. So this meeting here today brings hope to writers, imprisoned writers the world over. I remember my mother, when I was leaving Iran to migrate to the United States, on the day I was leaving, she kept telling me, tell them what is happening to us. And I think that we as readers, not just as writers, have the responsibility to tell them and to keep informed. That is why organizations like PEN become so crucial, so essential to us, because they keep us informed. They put us in the experience of these imprisoned writers whose names we might not have heard of even. And that is why I think I would like to end with what some people might think of as a slogan, but I hate slogans. And so it is mainly a plea. This is how I ended my book, Reading Dangerously, and this is how I have ended many of my talks, and I would like to share it with you. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, my plea is, writers and readers of the world, unite. You literally have nothing to lose but your chains. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really incredible and moving words. I believe if all the panelists can come forward for a moment, we can thank again all of our attendees. I very much appreciate some of the comments you all have put in the chat and in the Q&A. We are truly grateful for your support, for your participation in this. And again, thank you so much to each of our panelists and to Maria Arana and to Azar Nafisi. Just really grateful for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.